Why was she the only one staring at the map when everyone else had already left the briefing room? The fluorescent lights hummed above her, casting long, harsh shadows over the table, over the markers that traced lines no one else cared to follow. She could feel it in her bones. Something about this mission was off. Something that didn't fit into the neat, sanitized reports. But she kept silent, nodding politely when others offered half-hearted glances, pretending the quiet unease in her chest wasn't there. Captain Lena Thorne had never been the kind of soldier who drew attention. She didn't thrive on praise or seek camaraderie the way others did. Her strength came from patience, observation, from knowing when the world was watching and when it was. Her colleagues thought of her as reliable, quiet, efficient, precise. But what they didn't know, what she never volunteered, was the weight she carried every time she strapped into her gear or gripped a rifle. Every mission had cost her a piece of herself, and every night in the darkness of her small, cramped apartment, she measured that loss in silent tears and clenched fists. Her boots echoed as she left the briefing room, a sound too soft to be noticed but loud enough to remind her that she was alone. Outside, the wind cut through the base, carrying with it the sharp smell of rain-soaked asphalt and the faint metallic tang of gun oil from the armory. She inhaled deeply. The world smelled alive, chaotic, and yet fragile. Somewhere beyond the horizon, people were counting on her, and that knowledge pressed down on her chest with a weight she couldn't shake. The mission had been simple on paper: infiltrate, observe, extract. But simplicity was a lie. Reports had gone silent, comms were disrupted, and now, with the clock ticking and no word from the forward team, the mission had gone dark. Lena had trained for these moments, the ones where clarity was a luxury and instinct was the only guide. Yet even she felt the gnawing, creeping anxiety that whispered, "This is different." She knelt by her equipment, methodically checking each piece. Her rifle gleamed under the faint daylight spilling through the hangar windows. The scope reflected the pale blue of the sky, but her eyes, dark and focused, caught the nuances the glass couldn't reveal: the smallest scuff, the faintest misalignment, a hint of imperfection that could mean the difference between life and death. Lena's hands moved with deliberate care, muscles remembering motions she had repeated 1,000 times. Yet every action carried the weight of potential consequences she couldn't yet see. Her thoughts drifted briefly to the team. Sergeant Malik, always joking to keep his own fear at bay. Private Reyes, so eager to prove herself she often risked more than protocol allowed. And Lieutenant Harlow, whose calm exterior masked a storm she had yet to understand. Each of them was a person, a life she could not afford to ignore. And yet their fates rested partly in her hands. She wasn't supposed to think about that. Not yet. Not now. But the thought refused to leave. A distant rumble rolled across the base, distant but growing, a sound that made her pulse quicken. Lena adjusted the strap on her shoulder and stood, scanning the perimeter. The base was waking up, crews moving like ghosts between vehicles and equipment. She noticed the small things: the tension in a technician's shoulders, the slight tremor in a young corporal's hands as he loaded rounds. These details spoke more than words. They always did. "Thorne," a voice called, clipped, professional. Lieutenant Harlow approached, face serious but not unkind. "Recon teams are out. Comms are still dead. Command wants an update," but he trailed off, letting the unspoken dread hang between them. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Instead, she gestured toward the operational map laid across the back of a transport vehicle. "Something doesn't add up. They're moving too fast for what intel suggested, and the terrain, it's changed." Harlow frowned. "Changed how?" "Shadows," Lena said softly. "Shadows where there shouldn't be any. Noise patterns, small things, subtle but telling. They've been compromised, or they're hiding. I don't know which yet." He studied her for a moment. There was a flicker of doubt in his eyes, not in her abilities, but in his own judgment. "You think we should go in?" She met his gaze, steady, unwavering. "We go in, but carefully, and we go prepared to carry the team out if it comes to that." There was a silence between them, thick with unspoken fears and the knowledge that decisions like these rarely had clear right answers. Lena's mind raced, replaying scenarios, calculating odds, weighing consequences. Every movement they made from this point would ripple outward, affecting lives she hadn't yet met. She turned back to her equipment, selecting the small, worn flashlight she carried in her vest. The beam wasn't powerful, but it cut through darkness efficiently. She tucked it into her pocket, fingers brushing the cold metal of her rifle, and felt a brief pang of vulnerability. This wasn't just about training or skill. This was about trust, judgment, and the quiet courage it took to step into unknown danger while the rest of the world remained blind to it. The transport hum of engines signaled the final assembly. Soldiers moved with precise choreography, checking gear, exchanging terse instructions. Lena observed, nodding who was jittery, who was overconfident, who wore fear like a second skin. She recognized these patterns instantly. She had seen them in herself. And she also recognized the opportunity, the chance to be the anchor, the light in the dark, the one who kept the fragile structure from crumbling. As they boarded the vehicle that would take them to the drop zone, Lena allowed herself a moment to close her eyes. She pictured the faces of the missing team. She thought of the sun cutting across the mountainside at dawn, of the sharp, sweet smell of pine and soil after rain, of the way the wind could carry sound and disguise movement. All of these details mattered, and she had to remember them. She had to use them. The journey to the drop zone was tense. Engines roared, shadows shifted across the cabin, and every creak of the frame made her heart skip. The team fell silent, each lost in thoughts, each bracing for what was to come. Lena's eyes swept the horizon, scanning for anomalies, listening for patterns in the wind. She could feel the eyes of her team on her, though none of them spoke. They knew instinctively that she was more than a soldier. She was a guide, a sentinel, a keeper of small lights in overwhelming darkness. The drop point came into view, a jagged slice of earth carved by unseen hands, rivers cutting paths through dense forest like silver ribbons in shadow. She felt a chill in her spine. This was where clarity would meet uncertainty, where instinct would collide with reality. Positions, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. But it carried weight. Orders didn't always need to be loud. Sometimes presence spoke louder than words. The first step off the transport was a leap into the unknown. Lena led, scanning, listening, adjusting. Her boots hit the damp earth lightly, almost reverently. Around her, her team spread out, eyes wide, muscles taut. Each shadow was a threat, each rustle of leaves a potential disaster. And yet she moved with calm purpose, every action deliberate, measured, precise. Hours passed like this, silent, tense, the world reduced to the space immediately around her. She noticed patterns, footprints in mud, snapped branches, displaced rocks. Small things, almost invisible, but they told a story. And with each revelation, her determination grew. She would not allow the mission to fail. She would not allow the team to be lost, not if she could help it. By midday, the rain had begun to fall in thin, steady sheets, soaking uniforms, drenching rifles. The air smelled of wet earth and ozone, and every sound seemed amplified, sharper. Lena moved carefully, scanning the horizon. Something caught her eye, a flash of movement, too deliberate to be wind, too brief to confirm. She froze, hand instinctively on her rifle, breath held. The team followed her lead, silent, tense, waiting for instruction. "Keep moving," she whispered finally, voice steady, "but stay alert." The rest of the day unfolded like this: tension, observation, cautious progression. Every step brought new questions. Why had the forward team gone silent? What had they seen? Why were the patterns in the terrain suddenly different from intel reports? Lena had no answers yet. Only instincts, only careful observation, only the quiet, growing certainty that the mission required more than strategy. It required someone to carry the light. By evening, they reached a ridge overlooking the valley where the missing team was last reported. The sun had begun its descent, painting the clouds in bruised purples and fiery oranges. Lena knelt, scanning the valley through her scope, fingers tight on the trigger. She caught sight of something, a glint, movement, then nothing. It was enough to make her stomach knot. The team waited tense, trusting her judgment. "Something's here," she murmured. "We're not alone, stay sharp." The sun slipped lower, shadows growing long, twisting across the valley like fingers. Lena could feel her heart in her throat, the weight of responsibility pressing down. But there was no time for doubt. Not now. Because in the dark, the light she carried would be the only thing that mattered, and she was ready to shine it, no matter the cost. Sometimes courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's the quiet certainty that someone must act, and that action, though unseen, can change everything. Why had no one told them about the silence? The dead air in their comms was more than a technical glitch. It was a warning. Lena felt it in the tightening of her chest, in the way her fingers brushed her rifle with both reverence and dread. Every step forward felt like stepping into a void, a space where the rules of reason had faded. And yet she led because someone had to. The valley stretched before them, darkening under the weight of approaching night. Rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the ground remained slick, uneven. Every footprint she left was quickly erased by the persistent drizzle, as if the earth itself conspired to hide what lay ahead. Lena's eyes darted between patches of foliage, twisted tree trunks, and shadows that seemed to move with intent. The wind carried a low, almost imperceptible sound, a whisper through the leaves that made her pause, breath caught halfway. "Did anyone else hear that?" Malik whispered, his voice tight. Lena shook her head. "Focus, keep moving." She didn't admit that yes, she had heard it. And yes, it unsettled her in ways that no amount of training could erase. It wasn't fear that gripped her, it was recognition. Something was there, watching, waiting, assessing, and she had no intel to predict its intentions. As they pressed forward, Lena noticed the first tangible signs of the forward team's passage. A dropped glove, scuffed mud, a snapped branch. Tiny, almost insignificant details to the untrained eye, but she saw patterns. She saw the urgency in the spacing of footprints, the uneven stride, the slight deviation from expected paths. Someone had been running or hiding. Someone had been scared. Her mind flashed back to the mission briefing, to the faces around the table who hadn't looked twice at her, the whispers behind her back, the subtle exclusions. She had always moved through life unnoticed, invisible unless she chose otherwise. And now, in the silent, dripping valley, that invisibility was an asset. She could observe without distraction. She could lead without interference. But the loneliness of it pressed on her chest like a weight she wasn't sure she could carry forever. They found a temporary vantage point on a ridge that gave a partial view of the valley floor. Lena adjusted her scope, scanning slowly, systematically. The rifle was an extension of her senses, translating light, shadow, and distance into actionable knowledge. And then she saw it, a figure prone, obscured by foliage, motionless. Her pulse quickened. "Forward team," Reyes asked softly, a tremor in her voice that betrayed her nerves. Lena didn't answer immediately. She zoomed in again, tracing the outline, noting details. The helmet was cracked, muddy, but recognizable. The uniform marked him as part of the missing squad. Relief should have flooded her, but it didn't. The figure was alive, yes, but he wasn't safe. Something had changed. Something had gone horribly wrong. "Secure the perimeter," she ordered, voice calm but firm. "We move carefully, eyes open. Every sound counts." The descent into the valley was cautious, deliberate. The earth was slippery, uneven, treacherous. Every step could betray them, every rustle of leaves could give away their position. Lena's senses were stretched taut, absorbing every detail. The whisper of wind over the grass, the drip of water from saturated branches, the distant echo of a bird startled into flight. Each sound, each motion could be a clue or a threat. As they neared the forward team member, Lena noted more signs of struggle: torn fabric, faint blood stains, and a peculiar disturbance in the mud that suggested something, or someone, had passed very recently. Her stomach churned. This wasn't just a missed comms problem. Something had ambushed them. Something had learned to move in silence, to strike without warning. She knelt beside the injured soldier, her hands moving quickly but gently over wounds, checking vitals. Malik hovered nearby, tense but ready. Ray's eyes were wide, darting between Lena, the soldier, and the dark forest that seemed to close around them. "He's stable for now," Lena murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "But we need to move fast." The soldier's eyes fluttered open. Fear, recognition, relief, confusion, all at once. Lena caught the subtle tremor in his lips as he tried to speak. They came from the North Ridge. You took others." His voice faltered, and Lena placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Not now," she said softly. "We get you out, we survive first. Answers come later." Her decision was instantaneous. They couldn't linger. The longer they stayed, the more likely the enemy, or whatever had attacked, would return. Lena's leadership was quiet, invisible, but absolute. She moved first, scanning, observing, listening. The team followed instinctively because they trusted her in ways she could not articulate. The trek back toward a safer location was grueling. Darkness deepened, rain intensified, and the valley seemed to close in around them. Lena felt the ache in her legs, the sting of cold water seeping into her uniform, but she ignored it. Every thought, every sensation was filtered through the lens of responsibility. She was carrying more than a wounded soldier. She was carrying hope, purpose, the fragile thread that held the mission together. Night fell fully, and with it came a new set of challenges. Shadows moved differently, sounds warped, and the world became unpredictable. Lena instructed the team to take staggered positions, keeping watch in rotations. Silence became their ally, communication through gestures and subtle signals their only lifeline. Around the small fire they managed to light, Lena allowed herself a brief pause. She removed her helmet, letting rain-soaked hair cling to her face, and took stock of the team. Each member was exhausted, every muscle taut with tension. She caught their expressions of pride mixed with fear, fatigue mixed with resolve. She saw herself in them, in the way they carried themselves, in the quiet determination that refused to break even when the world seemed against them. Her thoughts drifted, as they often did, to home, to the family she hadn't seen in months, the letters she hadn't had time to read, the life outside this endless cycle of missions and danger. She wondered if they even knew what it cost her to be here, to keep moving, to shoulder burdens they could not see. But the thought was fleeting. There was no time for regrets, only action, only vigilance. A sudden noise snapped her attention to the present. The underbrush rustled, faint, deliberate. Lena's hand went instinctively to her rifle, muscles coiling. The team froze, breath held. Time seemed to stretch, every second elongated, every heartbeat amplified. The rustle grew closer, deliberate, controlled, unlike the random chaos of the wind or animals. Lena's mind raced. Who or what was approaching? Friend or foe? The valley offered no clues, only shadows and uncertainty. She signaled the team to stay low, her fingers trembling just slightly on the rifle trigger. She remembered the soldier they had rescued, remembered the fear in his eyes, the unfinished sentences about those taken. "Stay calm," she whispered to herself. "Observe, wait." Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, and then a figure emerged from the darkness. Not hostile, not immediate threat, but human. A single scout from an unknown faction, eyes wary, weapon raised slightly. Lena's hand remained steady on her rifle. She could see the fear mirrored in his eyes, the hesitation. This was a test of trust, a fragile balance between survival and confrontation. She stepped forward, hands visible, voice calm but authoritative. "We're not looking for a fight. We have wounded. We're moving out. You can help or you can step aside." The scout's eyes flicked to her rifle, then to the injured soldier, then back to her. Silence hung thickly. Lena felt the weight of the moment, the fragile life of choices that could tip into violence at the slightest misstep. And then slowly he lowered his weapon, nodding once. A small victory, silent, almost imperceptible, but enough. They moved together cautiously, Scout guiding them through a safer path. Lena felt a surge of quiet pride, not in herself, but in the team, in the ability to navigate danger without needless bloodshed, in the power of observation and patience over brute force. She understood, in a new, visceral way, that sometimes survival depended not on aggression, but on restraint. By the time they reached a secure position on higher ground, the rain had stopped. The first faint light of dawn began to touch the valley, casting soft hues of gold and rose over the wet terrain. Lena allowed herself a rare, brief moment to breathe, to absorb the silence that followed the storm. Around her, the team rested, weary but alive. She had carried them through the darkness, not with loud heroics, but with quiet resolve, careful observation, and unwavering focus. And yet the unanswered questions lingered. The missing soldiers, the ambush, the strange scout, all pieces of a puzzle she had not yet solved. Lena knew that the mission was far from over, that more challenges awaited. But for now, there was survival. For now, the light she carried had not dimmed. Sometimes strength is silent. Sometimes courage is measured not by the battles fought, but by the lives protected and the choices made when no one is watching. Why did the silence feel heavier now than it ever had before? Lena could hear her own heartbeat in the quiet, loud and insistent, echoing in her skull. The valley below seemed deceptively calm, the mist curling over trees and rocks like smoke rising from a forgotten fire. She crouched behind a jagged outcrop, fingers tracing the worn grooves of her rifle, scanning the terrain with meticulous care. Something was wrong. She could feel it in every fiber of her being. The team was asleep, or pretending to be. Fatigue had finally caught up with them, the muscles locked in tense exhaustion slowly uncoiling. Lena allowed herself a brief glance at their faces, softened by sleep, unguarded. Ray's, still wet from the rain, shivered under her poncho. Malik's brow was furrowed even in rest, a perpetual worry etched into his features. Harlow, ever composed, remained alert enough that even in slumber he seemed ready for the next move. Lena exhaled, letting the weight of the night settle on her shoulders. She wasn't just a soldier leading a mission anymore. She was a guardian. Every misstep could mean death. Every hesitation could allow the darkness to swallow them whole. And yet she was tired, not just physically, but in the marrow of her bones. Her mind wandered briefly despite the tension. Home. The quiet streets, the faint smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen, the laughter she hadn't heard in months. She remembered her father's advice years ago when she had first enlisted. Courage isn't loud. It's showing up even when the world doesn't notice. Those words had guided her through countless operations. Now they felt like a lifeline, a tether to something human in a world that had grown impossibly cold. A sudden movement snapped her back to the present. Lena froze, eyes narrowing through the mist. A shadow flitted across a ridge, too quick to be human, or at least not entirely. She signaled silently to the team, who stirred but remained still, every muscle tensed. The storm had left the valley slick and treacherous, but this was worse. Someone or something was out there waiting, watching. She activated the scope, scanning the area methodically. Every detail mattered: the way leaves shifted, the subtle movement of water along rocks, a broken branch that hadn't been there before. Her breath slowed, each exhale deliberate, grounding herself in observation. "Lena," Malik's whisper cut through the quiet. She shook her head slightly. "Not now. Focus first. Threat assessment first." The soldier beside her would have to trust that she could see what he could not, and right now she could see enough. Hours passed like this. The mist thickened, reducing visibility to mere feet. Lena's mind began replaying fragments of the previous days: the ambush, the rescued soldier, the cryptic movements in the valley. Each memory was a thread, weaving into a pattern she hadn't yet understood. Something had set this chain of events into motion, and it was far from random. By midday, they had reached a partially collapsed structure, remnants of what had once been a small outpost. It offered cover and a vantage point, though it was dangerous. Every step had to be considered, every creaking beam assessed for stability. Lena moved first, scanning the surrounding terrain. She could feel the tension of her team behind her, relying on her silently, as if she had become their anchor in the storm. Inside the ruins, they found more signs of the forward team: discarded supplies, a torn map, a pair of boots wedged under a beam. Lena's stomach twisted. These weren't just indicators of passage. They were clues of struggle, of desperation. Someone had tried to survive here, but for how long? Lena, Ray's whispered voice trembling. Do you think? Stay quiet, Lena said softly, though her own heart echoed the question. Do I think they survived? She didn't answer because the silence itself demanded patience. To speak too soon was to admit doubt, and doubt now could kill. She knelt by a pile of debris, inspecting a small, broken radio. Fingers traced the jagged edges. She understood immediately why comms had failed. This was no accident. Someone or something had disabled their lines of communication deliberately. It wasn't just the terrain or the storm, it was intentional. Her thoughts drifted to the implications. Who had the capability to orchestrate such a precise strike, and why? The questions gnawed at her, but she forced herself to focus. Answers could wait. Survival could not. As they prepared to move again, Lena felt a prickling at the back of her neck, a premonition, subtle but insistent. She scanned the ruined structure, every shadow and corner, her rifle moving with her instincts. And then she saw it. A faint glimmer, a reflection of sunlight off metal, hidden behind a crumbling wall. Her pulse quickened. The enemy wasn't just near, they were anticipating them. Lena signaled the team to stay low, creeping closer with deliberate stealth. Every movement was calculated, silent. She could hear her own heartbeat, but more importantly, she could hear the world around her. The drip of water, the rustle of foliage, the whisper of the wind carrying hints of danger. As she approached the glint, she realized it was a cache of supplies, medical kits, food rations, communication devices. A deliberate trail left for them to find. But why? Trap, test, or a desperate message from someone trying to survive? Lena's mind raced. She couldn't afford to make assumptions. She motioned for Harlow to join her, and together they assessed the supplies. Minimal damage, carefully hidden but clearly placed for observation. Someone wanted them to find this. Someone wanted them to notice. And the more Lena considered it, the more unnerving the thought became. The forward team hadn't just been ambushed. They were being hunted, strategically, meticulously. The sun had begun its descent again, painting the sky in bruised oranges and purples. Lena knew they couldn't linger. The valley would not forgive hesitation. She organized the team, distributing supplies with care, ensuring every detail was accounted for. Every ration, every medical kit, every piece of intel could be the difference between life and death. As they moved on, Lena felt a flicker of frustration rising, anger at the unseen enemy, at the circumstances, at the fact that despite every preparation, they were still vulnerable. But she swallowed it. Frustration was a luxury they couldn't afford. Focus was the only weapon she had that day. By nightfall, they found temporary shelter in a shallow cave at the base of the ridge. Lena instructed rotations for watch duty, her own turn first. She sat near the entrance, rifle across her lap, listening. Every sound was amplified. The drip of condensation, the distant call of an owl, the faint rustle that might have been wind or something else. Her mind wandered to the soldier they had rescued. She had learned his name, Corporal Darris. Brave, disciplined, frightened. She thought of the other missing team members. Names, faces, fragments of personality. They were real people, not just statistics. She couldn't forget that. Every decision she made carried their weight. Every choice could honor or betray them. She remembered her own reasons for enlisting. The desire to protect, to make sense of a world that often felt arbitrary in its cruelty, to prove to herself that she could endure when others might falter. Every mission reinforced that resolve. Every moment of fear, every pang of doubt, only solidified her commitment. Hours passed. Sleep came in fragmented stretches, punctuated by vigilance and instinct. Lena's dreams were restless, a mixture of the past and present, of faces she had saved and faces she had lost. She awoke to the faint glow of dawn, the first light filtering through the cave entrance. Her team stirred, weary but alive. She allowed herself a moment to acknowledge that small victory. Survival was not glamorous, but it was meaningful. The plan for the next phase of the mission crystallized in her mind. They would continue to track the forward team to gather intel to remain unseen but effective. Every step required caution, every choice demanded precision. Lena understood that the valley was not just a battlefield, it was a test of patience, strategy, and inner strength, and she would not fail. As they emerged from the cave, Lena cast a final glance at the shadows behind them. Somewhere in the darkness, eyes followed, and she welcomed the challenge, because she was not just a soldier moving through terrain. She was a light in the dark, a steady presence in chaos, a force tempered by observation, compassion, and unwavering resolve. Sometimes leadership is silent. Sometimes the strongest acts are the ones that go unnoticed. And sometimes survival depends not on brute force, but on the quiet, deliberate choices made when the world is watching, or when it is. Why did the silence feel like it was watching them now? Lena could sense it in every footstep, every rustle of leaves, every breath that misted in the chill morning air. The valley had grown more than a battlefield. It had become a test of endurance, a place where instinct and patience were worth more than bullets. And she was acutely aware. The forward team's absence was a shadow she could not ignore, a reminder that their survival was fragile, fleeting. The team moved cautiously low to the ground, weapons trained, senses heightened. Every so often, Lena paused, scanning, listening, recalibrating. Her mind worked constantly, connecting dots invisible to the untrained eye. Mud tracks, displaced rocks, faint scratches on bark. They told a story, and she was reading it, piecing together a puzzle the rest of the team didn't even see. "Do you think they made it?" Reyes asked softly, her voice betraying exhaustion and fear. Lena's eyes never left the terrain. "I don't know," she admitted, "but we're going to find out. We keep moving, step by step." The honesty in her words was like a small anchor. In missions like this, certainty was a lie. Truth was measured in observation, caution, and the willingness to act when the moment demanded it. Lena had learned long ago that leadership wasn't about being fearless. It was about holding fear in check, shaping it into focus, and channeling it into deliberate action. Hours passed in tense silence. The valley seemed endless, a labyrinth of shadow and mist, each turn offering promise and threat in equal measure. Lena's mind wandered briefly to why she had chosen this path, the desire to prove herself, yes, but more than that. A need to carry light where there was none, to protect when the world had turned indifferent, to act when others could not. Every mission was a continuation of that purpose. By midday, the team reached a narrow pass flanked by sheer rock faces. The sun, high in the sky, struck the valley floor in harsh streaks, making shadowed corners nearly invisible. Lena's instincts screamed caution. The terrain funneled movement. Ambushes could come from above, below, or behind. She motioned for a halt. Kneeling, she scanned the cliff faces with her scope, noting subtle indentations, shifted stones, and faint scuff marks. Her mind raced. Every anomaly could be a sniper, a trap, or worse, a situation they couldn't anticipate. Her heart thumped steadily, each beat a reminder of the weight she carried. "We're being watched," she whispered to Harlow, who nodded, eyes sharp. "Keep your positions. Raise, Malik, cover flanks. Move slow, deliberate." Every step forward was tense, each movement choreographed. Lena's rifle became an extension of her senses, translating light and shadow into actionable knowledge. She felt the familiar rhythm of focus, the almost meditative awareness that came when danger pressed close but did not yet strike. Then she saw it, a glint of metal barely perceptible nestled among rocks above the pass. A sniper positioned with meticulous precision. Lena froze, signaling silently. The team crouched, breaths held, every muscle coiled. The sniper had the advantage, the first shot could be lethal. Lena's mind raced, calculating angles, timing, wind, distance. She knew confrontation was inevitable, but she also knew that panic would be fatal. Steady hands, sharp eyes, and careful timing could turn the moment to their favor. She made her choice. Raising her rifle slightly, she fired a single shot, not to kill but to disrupt. The sound cracked sharply, echoing across the pass. A shadow shifted and the sniper retreated, disappearing into the rocks. Lena exhaled, muscles relaxing slightly. Small victory, but enough to remind them of the stakes. The team pressed on, each step heavier than the last. The narrow pass had given them no answers, only more questions. Where exactly had the forward team gone? Who had orchestrated the ambush? Every anomaly suggested a level of planning and intent that unnerved Lena. The enemy wasn't random. They were calculating, observant, adaptive. By late afternoon, they found a temporary shelter behind a rock outcrop. Lena instructed rotations for watch duty, her own shift first. She settled into a position overlooking the pass, raincoat clinging, rifle ready, eyes scanning. The valley stretched endlessly, beautiful and threatening in equal measure. She allowed herself a moment to reflect, not on the mission, but on the cost. The forward team had been trained, disciplined, competent. Yet here they were missing. The thought weighed heavily. Lena's mind flickered to memories of previous missions, losses, and close calls. She remembered the faces of those who hadn't returned, the letters never sent, the conversations cut short. Each memory carried guilt, grief, and a stubborn resolve that she would not let history repeat itself here. A movement to her left snapped her attention forward. Lena's instincts kicked in. She raised her rifle slightly, scanning. A young scout from an allied faction appeared, cautious but unarmed, signaling for parley. Lena studied him, noticing the tension in his stance, the fear that mirrored their own. Trust was fragile, a currency they could not afford to squander. "State your purpose," Lena said quietly, voice calm but authoritative. I can guide you," the scout replied, eyes darting nervously. "Safe passage, avoid ambushes, forward team still alive but trapped further north." Lena's heart thudded. Finally, a lead, but caution remained paramount. "Why should we trust you?" she asked, scanning the valley around them for other threats. The scout hesitated. Then, "Because they didn't survive without help, and because I don't want more dead." She nodded slowly. Trust was a choice, not a given. Lena allowed a small hand signal and the team moved cautiously under the scout's guidance. Every step was tense, deliberate, every shadow a potential threat. And yet, each move carried the possibility of hope, of survival, of answers. Night fell again, heavy and oppressive. Lena maintained her position, observing, calculating, listening. The forward team's trail grew clearer. Signs of struggle, footprints, broken foliage. The scout led them along a narrow ridge, safer than the valley below but still fraught with risk. At a small, concealed clearing, they finally found remnants of the forward team, hasty shelter, discarded weapons, signs of medical care administered in panic. Lena's stomach twisted. They were alive but barely. Hunger, exhaustion, and fear had hollowed them. She knelt beside the nearest member, assessing injuries with swift precision, hands steady despite the ache in her own muscles. "They're alive," she murmured, more to herself than anyone. "But we need to move, now." The team rallied, distributing medical supplies, organizing what little food remained. Lena's mind raced with plans, extraction routes, alternate paths, contingencies for enemy engagement. Every decision had to be deliberate. Lives depended on it. As they prepared to move, Lena glanced around at her team. Exhaustion etched into every line of their faces, determination shining through nonetheless. She felt a surge of quiet pride, not in herself, but in them, in the way they adapted, followed, and trusted. The silent resilience of ordinary soldiers could be as powerful as any weapon. The night trek was grueling. The valley had become a maze, shadows and fog twisting perception. Lena led with precision, instincts honed to perfection. Every sound, every subtle shift in terrain became information. The team moved like ghosts, silent and deliberate, the weight of survival pressing down on each of them. Hours later, they reached a narrow ridge overlooking a fast-flowing river. Water thundered below, white and frothy, a natural barrier between them and the valley floor. Lena scanned the far bank. noting potential hazards and ambush points. Extraction here would require careful timing, precision, and trust in one another. She turned to the team. We cross carefully, no one rushes, one step at a time, eyes open. The night was alive with sound, the rush of water, the whisper of wind, the faint, distant calls of animals. Lena felt every vibration through her boots, every nuance through her rifle. They moved with caution, each soldier attuned to the other, following her lead. By the time they reached the far side, dawn was breaking, painting the sky in muted pastels. Exhausted, muddy, and wet, the team paused to catch breath. Lena looked at the faces around her, nodding relief, lingering fear, and a hard-earned resolve. They had survived another night, but the mission was far from over. Sometimes survival isn't about victory. It's about endurance. It's about patience, observation, and the quiet courage to carry others through darkness when no one else will. Lena understood this now more than ever. She had become the light in a place where darkness threatened to consume everything. And though the day ahead promised new challenges, she was ready. Because she carried not just weapons or training, but something far stronger: focus, determination, and the unyielding will to protect those who could not protect themselves. Why did the wind feel like it carried secrets? Lena could sense the valley watching, listening, judging each move they made. The mist hung low, thick with moisture and the weight of unseen danger. Every footstep echoed like a drumbeat of inevitability. She led her team forward, shoulders tight, muscles coiled, mind racing with calculations. Survival was no longer about instinct alone. It was about foresight, about predicting the unpredictable. The forward team's remnants trailed behind them, limping, supporting each other, fragile but determined. Lena kept her eyes on the path ahead, scanning every shadow, every shift in terrain, every telltale glint of metal. The valley was alive with hidden threats, and she could feel them in the subtle tremor of the earth, in the faint crack of a branch, in the whisper of wind that didn't belong. "Are we getting closer?" Reyes asked, voice tight with fatigue. "Closer to what?" Lena replied, though she knew the answer herself. Closer to safety, closer to answers, closer to the people who had vanished without a trace. Each step was measured, deliberate, calculated. There was no room for haste, for error, for recklessness. Not now. The path narrowed, winding through dense undergrowth. Moss hung like curtains from trees, dripping with condensation. Every movement had to be precise, quiet. Lena felt the familiar surge of tension in her chest, the subtle itch of adrenaline that sharpened her senses. The soldiers behind her mirrored her movements instinctively, trusting her judgment even when fear gnawed at their resolve. A faint sound reached her ears, almost imperceptible: footsteps, or the shifting of the forest itself. Lena froze, scanning. Her heart hammered, but she did not panic. Every nerve, every sense was alert. The valley was speaking, and she had learned to listen. Then she saw it, a shadow darting between trees, quick, deliberate, predatory. Lena signaled the team to hold. Harlow moved beside her, rifle ready, muscles taut. The forward team looked on with a mixture of hope and terror, unsure of what waited in the darkness. Lena's mind raced. Whoever or whatever was out there, they were organized, careful, deliberate. This wasn't a random attack, it was a hunt. She thought of the missing soldiers, of Corporal Darris' words, of the trail that had led them here. Every clue now made sense. The ambush, the disrupted communications, the carefully placed supplies. Someone wanted them to follow, wanted them to stumble, wanted them to face fear under controlled circumstances. She motioned for a slow advance, every step calculated. Her rifle swept the area, eyes narrowing through the scope, catching every glimmer of movement. The forest responded to their presence, shadows shifting, branches trembling, leaves whispering. Lena's senses were stretched thin, but she thrived under pressure. This was where she belonged, in the tense space between action and patience, where survival depended on precision and observation. Suddenly, a rustle to the left. Lena swung her rifle, sighting a figure crouched low, weapon trained but hesitant. It was not enemy combatant. The figure lowered the weapon slowly, revealing the pale, sweat-streaked face of one of the forward team members they had been searching for. Relief should have washed over Lena, but it was tempered by the knowledge that danger was still near, lurking unseen. "Stay calm," she whispered, lowering her rifle but keeping alert. "We're together now, stick to the plan." The reunion was brief. No time for celebration. The wounded were stabilized as best as possible, supplies distributed, and the team prepared for the next leg of their journey. Lena's mind raced, mapping out routes, contingency plans, and escape paths. Every choice carried weight, every decision could be the difference between life and death. As they moved deeper into the forest, Lena noticed subtle signs: displaced soil, snapped branches, faint footprints alongside their own. Someone had been here recently, tracking them, studying their patterns. Her pulse quickened, not with fear but with focus. Observation was their ally now, patience their weapon. Night began to descend, thick and suffocating. The forest transformed into a labyrinth of shadows, each movement amplified, each sound magnified. Lena instructed rotations for watch duty, taking the first shift herself. She crouched behind a large boulder, rifle across her lap, eyes scanning the darkness. The wind carried a faint scent of smoke, or was it just the memory of the storm? Her senses could not tell the difference. Memories surfaced unbidden. The first time she had held a rifle, hands trembling with excitement and fear. The first mission where mistakes had cost lives. The faces of friends lost, the guilt that had never left her, the silent promise she had made to protect those who could not protect themselves. All of it converged now, sharpening her focus, hardening her resolve. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Lena noticed every subtle sound: the distant cry of an animal, the faint snap of a twig, the whisper of leaves brushing against one another. And then movement, closer, deliberate, not random, not accidental. Lena raised her rifle, hands steady, breathing controlled. The forest seemed to hold its breath alongside her. A figure emerged, cautious but deliberate. Lena could see the fear mirrored in its eyes, the hesitation. It was a scout from the enemy faction, young, nervous, but skilled. She studied him, noting the tension in his stance, the way he shifted weight from foot to foot, the subtle cues of training. Trust would have to be earned in this moment. She lowered her rifle slightly, keeping hands visible. "We don't want conflict. We're looking for survivors. Help us or step aside." The scout's eyes darted to the forward team, then back to Lena. Hesitation stretched between them like a taut wire. And then slowly he lowered his weapon. A single nod. Cooperation, fragile and tentative, but enough to move forward. The forest guided them to a hidden clearing, where remnants of the forward team were trapped behind fallen trees and shallow trenches. Hunger and exhaustion were etched into their faces, fear shadowing every movement. Lena knelt beside one, checking injuries, administering what aid she could with calm efficiency. "They're alive," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "But we move now, every second counts." The team rallied, distributing food and medical supplies, preparing for the final stretch. Lena's mind was already calculating the safest route out, timing for movement, contingencies for potential encounters. Every decision had to be precise, deliberate, flawless. Night deepened. The forest transformed into a living maze. Lena led the team with unwavering focus, each movement measured, silent, deliberate. Every step was informed by observation, experience, and intuition. The forward team followed, trusting her guidance, relying on her instincts. By the time they reached the river, a fast-flowing, frothy barrier that marked the edge of the valley, dawn was approaching. Lena scanned the opposite bank, noting potential hazards, ambush points, and escape paths. Extraction would be difficult, but possible. She turned to her team. "We cross carefully, one step at a time, eyes open, trust each other." The crossing was tense. Water thrashed around them, ice cold, threatening to sweep them away. Lena's hands were steady, voice calm, guiding, anchoring the team through each perilous step. They moved like ghosts, silent and deliberate, survival the only objective. By morning, they reached higher ground, exhausted, muddy, wet, but alive. Lena looked at her team, nodding relief, lingering fear, and the hard-earned resolve that shone in their eyes. They had survived another night, but the mission was far from over. Sometimes survival isn't about victory. It's about endurance, patience, and the quiet courage to carry others through darkness when no one else will. Lena understood this more deeply than ever. She was the light in a valley of shadows, and though challenges awaited, she was ready. Because she carried more than weapons or training. She carried focus, determination, and the unwavering will to protect those who could not protect themselves. Why did the night feel like it had a heartbeat of its own? Lena could sense it, a pulsing rhythm in the air, subtle but insistent, pressing against every nerve in her body. The valley was no longer just a battlefield. It had become a predator, stalking them, testing their resolve, waiting for mistakes to exploit. She crouched behind a jagged outcrop, scanning the dim horizon. Every shadow, every whisper of movement, every shifting leaf mattered. The forward team trudged behind her, ragged, bruised, and weary, but alive. Lena felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders heavier than ever. These soldiers weren't just numbers. They were people breathing, thinking, hopping. And now, in this fractured landscape, their survival rested entirely on her vigilance, her instincts, her quiet authority. Hours passed in tense, measured silence. Lena's mind raced, calculating angles, tracking patterns, anticipating hazards. Her rifle was more than a weapon. It was an extension of herself, translating every sight, sound, and vibration into actionable knowledge. And yet, the tension gnawed at her, subtle and persistent. Each step forward felt like stepping into a trap she couldn't yet see. Lena, Ray's voice was barely a whisper, carrying the fatigue and fear that hung over the group like mist. Do you think they're following us? Lena's gaze swept the valley below, her eyes narrowing through the scope. She didn't answer immediately. Observation before assumption, calculation before panic. The forest could deceive, shadows could betray, and every sound could be misinterpreted. But there were patterns, subtle, deliberate, and she had learned to read them. They're cautious, she said finally, voice low, steady. But yes, someone's tracking us. We need to stay vigilant, every step matters. The team pressed forward, moving cautiously through dense undergrowth. Moss and dew coated every surface, soaking boots and clothes, making each movement deliberate and exhausting. Lena noticed subtle signs, displaced soil, faint footprints, broken branches. Someone had been here recently. Someone had been watching them, studying their patterns, anticipating their choices. As night approached again, the team found a precarious shelter on a rocky ledge overlooking the valley floor. Lena instructed rotations for watch duty, taking the first shift herself. She crouched with rifle across her lap, senses stretched taut. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying faint, indistinct sounds, rustling, snapping, subtle echoes. The valley seemed alive, breathing, judging. Her thoughts drifted, unbidden, to the reason she had joined this life. Not for recognition, not for glory, but for purpose. To protect. To act when others could not. Every mission, every sleepless night, every close call was a thread in a tapestry she could not yet see in full. But she felt it forming, quiet but undeniable. Her life, her choices, her will, they all mattered. A movement in the shadows snapped her back to the present. Lena raised her rifle, muscles coiled, eyes sharp. A figure emerged, cautious, hands raised slightly, not hostile yet. The scout approached slowly, eyes darting, posture tense. Lena studied him, noting the precision of his movements, the subtle hints of training. Trust was a fragile thing here, earned through careful judgment and observation. State your purpose, she demanded softly. I can guide you, the scout replied, voice quivering. Safe passage. Forward team, they're trapped further north. I can help you reach them. Lena's heart skipped. Finally, a lead, but caution remained paramount. Why should we trust you? She asked, scanning the surrounding terrain for signs of ambush. The scout hesitated. Because they didn't survive without help, and I don't want more dead. Lena nodded slowly. Trust was a choice, not a given. She signaled the team forward cautiously, every step deliberate, silent, precise. The scout led them through hidden paths, avoiding open terrain, shadows flitting along the edges of their vision. Hours later, they reached a narrow clearing where remnants of the forward team were trapped, wounded, exhausted, barely clinging to hope. Hunger and fear were etched into their faces. Lena knelt beside one, checking injuries with swift, calm precision. "They're alive," she murmured, "but we need to move now, every second counts." The team rallied, distributing supplies, preparing for the next leg of their journey. Lena's mind calculated every detail: timing, paths, potential ambushes, extraction points. Every decision carried weight. Every choice could mean life or death. Night descended fully and the valley transformed into a living maze. Shadows lengthened, sounds amplified, danger palpable. Lena led the team with unwavering focus, each movement deliberate. The soldiers followed instinctively, trusting her guidance, relying on her instincts. By midnight, they reached a treacherous river crossing. Water rushed violently, icy and relentless. Lena scanned the far bank, noting obstacles, potential ambush points, escape routes. The crossing would be perilous, but it was necessary. "Careful, one step at a time. Eyes open. Trust each other," she instructed. The team moved cautiously, water thrashing around them. Lena's hands were steady, voice calm, anchoring them through the peril. Each step was precise, deliberate, controlled. Slowly, painstakingly, they reached the far bank. By dawn, they found higher ground. Exhaustion marked every face, but relief softened the tension. Lena surveyed her team, nodding pride, determination, lingering fear. They had survived another night, yet the mission was far from over. Her mind reflected on the lessons of the valley. Survival isn't measured by victories alone. It's about endurance, patience, and the courage to carry others through darkness. Lena realized that her role wasn't just tactical, it was moral. She was the light in a shadowed place, a presence of guidance and resilience. Sometimes the strongest acts are invisible. Sometimes courage is measured not by battles won, but by the lives preserved, the careful decisions made in silence. Lena understood that now more than ever. The valley remained tense, but she felt a quiet confidence, a sense of purpose that no threat could erode. They had endured, they had adapted, they had survived. And as she led the team onward, she carried with her not just skill or training, but an unyielding will to protect, to endure, and to illuminate the darkness wherever it threatened to consume them. Why did the forest feel like it was holding its breath? Lena could sense it. Every rustle, every shadow, every faint glimmer of light seemed charged with purpose, waiting for a single misstep to cascade into disaster. The valley had shifted from a place of tactical challenge into a crucible, testing patience, endurance, and resolve. She moved forward with deliberate precision, rifle at the ready, senses stretched taut. The forward team limped behind her, each step heavy with fatigue, each face etched with strain. Lena felt the weight of responsibility like a physical pressure on her chest. These soldiers weren't just allies, they were lives entrusted to her judgment, and she carried that trust with silent gravity. Every movement mattered, every decision carried consequence, and failure was no longer an abstract threat. It was very real. "Do you think they'll make it?" Reyes asked quietly, voice trembling under exhaustion and anxiety. Lena's eyes swept the tree line. She didn't answer immediately, her gaze cataloged every movement, every anomaly. Observation before conjecture, precision before fear. She felt the rhythm of the forest, the subtle pulse of unseen danger. Then she spoke, measured and calm. "If we stay alert, follow the plan, yes, we'll make it." The team pressed forward through dense undergrowth. Moss clung to boots and equipment, soaking them through. Rain from earlier storms had left everything slick and treacherous, and every step required deliberate care. Lena's mind worked constantly, mapping the terrain, assessing potential threats and anticipating ambushes. The valley was alive with unseen observers. She could feel them, and it sharpened her senses like a blade. Hours passed. Night fell. The darkness pressed close, a living thing that coiled around them, threatening to smother. Lena instructed rotations for watch duty, taking the first shift herself. She crouched behind a boulder, rifle steady, ears straining for the faintest sound. A twig snapping, leaves rustling, a shadow shifting unnaturally. The team slept, or attempted to, but the tension in the air allowed no real rest. Her thoughts drifted, as they inevitably did in these moments. She thought of home, quiet streets, the faint aroma of coffee, the laughter she hadn't heard in months. She thought of why she had chosen this life, not for accolades, not for recognition, but to act when others could not, to carry the light in darkness. Every mission, every sleepless night, every close call was a continuation of that purpose, though the valley pressed her patience to its limits. A rustle to her left brought her sharply into focus. Lena raised her rifle, muscles coiled, eyes locked on movement. A figure emerged, careful, deliberate. It was not a threat, but caution demanded vigilance. The scout they had encountered earlier emerged cautiously from shadow, eyes wide with the same tension that gripped her team. Trust was fragile, earned moment by moment in these conditions. "I can help," he whispered, voice trembling slightly. "We can reach them. Forward team, they're trapped but alive." Lena's pulse quickened. Finally, a lead, but caution tempered relief. "Why should we trust you?" she asked, eyes sweeping the darkness for any sign of deception. The scout's gaze flicked to the forward team, then back. "Because they didn't survive without help, and because I don't want more dead." She nodded slowly. Trust was a choice, and in this crucible every decision weighed heavily. She motioned the team forward, each step deliberate, careful, silent. The scout led them through hidden paths, avoiding open terrain, shadows flitting at the edges of their vision, danger ever present. By midnight, they reached a clearing where remnants of the forward team were trapped behind fallen trees and shallow trenches. Hunger and exhaustion were etched deeply into their faces. Fear lingered like a living thing, yet beneath it was stubborn resilience. Lena knelt beside one, checking injuries, administering aid with calm efficiency. "They're alive," she whispered to herself, "but we move now, every second counts." The team rallied, redistributing supplies, organizing the wounded, and preparing for the next stretch. Lena's mind charted every route, every contingency, every escape path. The valley had become a chessboard, and she needed to stay 10 moves ahead. Every decision carried weight. Every choice could mean life or death. Night deepened, oppressive and thick. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, and the forest became a labyrinth of threat and deception. Lena led the team with quiet authority, each step measured, deliberate, and precise. The soldiers moved like phantoms, silent and disciplined, following her lead. They reached a river, fast, frothy, and treacherous. Lena scanned the far bank, noting potential ambush points, obstacles, and extraction paths. The crossing would be perilous but necessary. "Careful, one step at a time. Eyes open. Trust each other," she instructed. The team advanced cautiously. Water pounded around their boots, icy and relentless. Lena's hands were steady, voice calm, guiding each soldier through the treacherous current. Every step was a calculated effort. One slip could mean disaster. Yet they persevered slowly, painstakingly, until they reached solid ground. By dawn, higher ground offered a fragile respite. Exhaustion marred every face, yet relief softened the tension. Lena surveyed her team, pride mingled with fatigue, determination with lingering fear. They had survived another night, but the mission was far from complete. The valley had taught her a vital truth. Survival wasn't measured in victories alone. It was endurance, patience, and courage in silence. Lena realized her role had expanded beyond tactical leadership. She was a beacon, a steady presence, a guide through the consuming darkness. Sometimes courage isn't loud. Sometimes it manifests in small, deliberate actions, in patience under pressure, in the unyielding will to protect others when hope seems fragile. Lena understood this with clarity. The mission had tested them, battered them, and forced every ounce of skill and mental fortitude. Yet, in this fragile dawn, she felt the steady pulse of purpose. They had endured. They had adapted. And she carried them forward, not just with training, not just with strategy, but with the quiet, unwavering resolve of a leader who would not let darkness claim them, not while she could stand against it. The valley still held threats, but Lena's confidence was grounded, steady. She led with quiet authority, focus unbroken, heart resolute. They had survived, and she carried the torch that would guide them through the final stretch. Because she carried more than weapons. She carried clarity, endurance, and the unshakable will to illuminate the path when all else seemed lost. Sometimes survival isn't measured in feats. It's measured in the lives preserved, the steps taken carefully, the patience that guides action when chaos surrounds. And Lena in that moment was the embodiment of that truth, a silent light in a shadowed world, unwavering, deliberate, unstoppable. Why did the dawn feel heavier this time? Lena could sense it in the weight of the air, in the hush of the valley, in the subtle tremor of the trees. The night had passed with peril and silence, but now light revealed truths that darkness had kept hidden. Every shadow, every bend in the terrain, every small sound could hold threat or salvation. The forward team, exhausted, battered, yet still alive, followed closely. Lena's eyes swept the horizon, noting every ridge, every potential ambush point, every subtle shift in the landscape. She had led them this far, through nights that felt endless, through a forest that seemed to breathe menace, and through a river that threatened to swallow them whole. And yet, something told her the most dangerous moments were still ahead. Lena, Reyes whispered, her voice tight with fatigue and fear. What if we don't make it? Lena stopped, turned, and looked at her team. Faces streaked with dirt and sweat, eyes wide with uncertainty, bodies trembling from exhaustion and cold. She knelt beside them, her gaze calm but unwavering. "We will," she said simply. "We've come too far to falter now. Step by step, breathe, focus. We carry each other through this." She rose, signaling the team to move forward. Every step was deliberate, precise. The valley seemed almost sentient, responding to their presence with whispers of wind, rustling leaves, distant echoes. Lena's senses were sharpened, heightened by months of training and years of accumulated experience, but also by a deeper understanding. Survival depended not just on skill, but on will, determination, and trust in each other. By mid-morning, they reached the edge of the valley, a narrow defile that led to open terrain and finally potential extraction. The sunlight was harsh now, casting long shadows and revealing details the night had hidden. Lena squinted, scanning the area. Signs of enemy movement were subtle but present. Scuffed soil, faint footprints, displaced foliage. Ambushes were likely, and she prepared accordingly. She positioned the team carefully, assigning watch points, scanning sectors, and setting silent signals for movement. The valley had taught them patience, vigilance, and the art of moving unseen. Lena felt the familiar tension, a low hum in her chest, reminding her that this could be the moment where everything hung in the balance. A faint noise drew her attention, soft at first, almost indistinguishable from the rustle of leaves. Then it became clearer, mechanical, deliberate, methodical, drones, surveillance. Someone knew they were here. Lena's pulse quickened, not from fear but from focus. Every muscle, every nerve, every sense was alert. She gestured for the team to halt, whispering instructions. "Stay low, move quietly, watch for movement above and ahead. We're not just crossing terrain, we're crossing danger." They advanced, shadows among shadows, careful to avoid clear lines of sight. Lena's mind raced, calculating angles, sightlines, timing. She adjusted movements, slowed the pace, ensured the wounded were supported. She felt the forward team's trust in her like a tangible weight, pressing her toward precision. Every decision mattered. Every step was life or death. Suddenly, a sharp sound, a twig snapping, echoed unnaturally. Lena froze. The valley seemed to respond, holding its breath. A figure appeared at the crest of a hill, silhouetted against sunlight, weapon raised. Not one, but several. Ambush. Lena's instincts kicked in instantly. She raised her rifle, eyes locked, muscles coiled. Her team mirrored her movements, disciplined, silent, tense. The enemy held position, observing, calculating. Lena knew the first move could determine the outcome. She took a breath, steadying herself, letting focus sharpen every thought. Then she acted, not with haste but with precision. A single shot, carefully aimed, controlled, disrupted the formation. The enemy flinched, scrambling behind cover. Lena's team moved, coordinated, flowing with practiced efficiency. The wounded were shielded, the team advancing under her guidance. Every step calculated, deliberate, essential. Minutes stretched like hours. Every breath was measured. Every heartbeat echoed in her ears. And yet the team pressed on, unstoppable in their collective will. Lena felt the weight of responsibility, yes, but also a quiet surge of pride, not in herself but in them. They adapted, they persevered, they survived. The enemy retreated finally, choosing distance over confrontation. Lena signaled the team forward, moving with care but deliberate speed. Every shadow, every ridge, every line of sight was managed. By midday, they reached open ground, an area visible from above but also a waypoint for extraction. A helicopter appeared on the horizon, a thin silhouette against the harsh light. Relief surged through Lena, tempered by caution. The extraction was not complete until they were safely aboard. She guided the team with unflinching focus, moving them through the clearing with careful precision, coordinating signals, positioning, and timing. The forward team boarded first, wounded supported, movement steady. Lena followed last, scanning constantly, aware that even a second's distraction could cost lives. As she climbed aboard, she allowed herself a brief exhale, a moment of relief that was as much mental as physical. They were safe, for now. The helicopter lifted off, rising above the valley. Lena looked down at the forest, the river, the valley floor. It was a place of trials, of fear, of challenge. But it had also been a place where courage, patience, and determination had prevailed, where lives had been preserved, where darkness had been confronted with focus and quiet resolve. Inside the helicopter, the team was silent at first, exhausted but alive. Some wept quietly, others simply stared, processing what had just occurred. Lena moved among them, offering calm words, steady presence, reassurance. She had carried them through darkness, and now they had emerged, scarred but unbroken. She found a moment to herself at the window, staring down at the valley receding below. Memories of fear, of loss, of moments where hope had seemed fragile, swirled in her mind. She thought of why she had chosen this path, not for recognition, not for fame, but to act when others could not, to be the light when darkness threatened to overwhelm. Sometimes courage doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it manifests in the quiet, deliberate choices made under pressure, in the patience to endure, and in the determination to protect others even when survival seems uncertain. Lena understood this more fully than ever. The valley below faded from view, shadows lengthening, the terrain becoming a memory. Lena allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She had led them, guided them, preserved life through observation, patience, and resolve. The mission had tested her, battered her, but ultimately it had proven that focus, determination, and the will to carry others through darkness could achieve the impossible. As the helicopter ascended into the open sky, Lena felt a quiet weight lift. The valley was behind them, but its lessons remained indelible. She looked around at her team, faces worn, eyes bright with relief and newfound respect, and felt a sense of quiet fulfillment. They had endured, they had survived, and she had been the steady hand guiding them through the shadows. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And sometimes light exists not in moments of spectacle, but in the quiet resolve to do what must be done, to protect, to endure, to lead. Lena closed her eyes briefly, letting the wind rush past, letting the sun warm her face. She had carried the light, and now, for the first time in a long while, she could feel it resting with her, steady and unyielding, a presence that would never fade, no matter the darkness that lay ahead. The valley receded into memory, but its lessons endured, and so did she.